Subtle skills, big results.
Welcome to the Ninja Selling Podcast.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to the Ninja Selling Podcast. We hope that you're having a great day today, and we have an incredibly special guest with us today. And before I introduce him, just a quick reminder, if you're new to Ninja, if you found this podcast, welcome. We appreciate having you here. And if you want to learn more about what Ninja Selling is, head over to ninjaselling.com. You can learn all about trainings and coaching. And you can also join our Facebook community. If you head over to Facebook and search for the Ninja Selling Podcast, you can join over, what is it, Garrett, 13,000?
Oh, yeah, we're approaching 14. We're getting close. We're just rounding up now, Matt. We're not trying to get too specific. Just round up.
Just rounding up. Okay. Hundreds of thousands of like-minded individuals.
There you go.
Just rounding up here. So you can join us there. But let's get to today's episode. And today we have with us Larry Kendall, the founder and creator of Ninja Selling. Larry, welcome to the podcast.
It's always an honor to be with you guys. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Garrett. I appreciate being here.
Yeah. Well, we always love having you on, and we always say we need to have you on more often. But this is going to be fun. We've been hearing from a lot of people. There's some things going on in the industry that we get to talk about today, which is going to be interesting. So shall we just dive right into it? I mean, just kind of address the elephant in the room here, which is these big NAR lawsuits that everybody's been talking about.
Let's do it.
I think we should jump right in. And Larry, I'm grateful to have you on today to kind of give your insights on this. And I think so many people have been dancing around this and tiptoeing around this topic, kind of going like, okay, what does this all mean? How do we want to focus on it? What do we want to be putting our time and energy towards around this whole thing? And I think we're all in agreement. And this is why it's so great to have you on to kind of share, where you see this as. So I'd love to go right in. So Larry, welcome, join us. And what are you kind of seeing around this whole thing? Because you've been very involved in kind of watching this from a distance, I'll say.
Yeah, thanks, guys. First of all, this is my 50th year in real estate. So I've been around a half century. I've seen a lot of changes in the industry. This is one of them. Regardless of the changes, what I notice is that the best people still thrive. So I, first of all, would like to say to all the ninjas to not panic over this and not let it be a gigantic distraction to you. And it can be. Every day there's multiple articles, read this. I think we need to just settle down. This will play out. We're not sure exactly how it will play out in the long run. It'll take probably several years to work out. But in the end, what we know is this: when you're in times of uncertainty, you want to focus on universal principles. And one of those is that money and people flow to value. So if you're creating value, you're still going to have a business. You're going to be very successful. Quite honestly, we could go deeper if we want to, but other parts of the world don't have an MLS. And we can talk about how they do business. And we train in 9 countries. And what we know is there are really top realtors there that are doing very, very well in those markets. So really, Ninja is built for creating value. It's built for this kind of a situation. And so I guess my message would be, let's follow what's going on. There will be some changes. We're not clear totally what those will be yet. But in the meantime, let's just take care of our people and create more in value than we receive in payment. We'll do just fine.
So let's talk about that just for a second, because I've been watching this play out, and I've really been trying not to get stuck in the mud on this. And it's been real easy, and you don't have to ask too many questions to all of a sudden be in the mud with somebody. And I'm watching a lot of real estate companies that are freaking out, and then they're freaking out all their agents, and then everybody's freaking out together. And then there's some brokerages that are really handling this in a calm way, and they're really being the step-down transformer within their office and saying, let's wait till we have more information. Let's figure out what's going on. We're all going to be going in a good direction here. And I think, Larry, and I think I want to say thank you to you for creating Ninja back in the day, because really I've been watching this and going this is the most amazing time for Ninja when there's confusion out there. And people need guidance, and they need value, and they need a trusted person in their world to say, how do I get from point A to point B? I know, there's, again, we don't want to get stuck in the weeds on the aspects of what this lawsuit and the attendant consequences of what the lawsuit was to the unintended consequences of this lawsuit. I think that like right now, I have never seen a better time for ninjas out there or people that operate their worlds in a ninja way, because people need the value and what we bring to the table and how we show for our clients more than ever I've seen before.
I totally agree. And it's interesting to watch, on the seller side, for example, the ninjas that I know that work the ninja system, they follow the seller process, the 16-step seller process. You know what? They are very seldom asked about their fees. The suit was brought by a group of sellers who were complaining that they didn't feel that there was value there to them. Specifically, they didn't feel like they should be paying the buyer side commission, et cetera, et cetera. And what's interesting is if you will follow the ninja path, follow the ninja system on the listing side, you will demonstrate your value. That's part of, you have to justify to a seller why they're paying you those dollars. And if you follow our process, you will do that. And I think on the buyer side, what we've started to do, and many ninja companies have been doing this for the last year or so, and we're now teaching it, is how do you need to articulate your value on the buyer side? And it just comes back to articulating your value. It's just not automatic what you're going to get paid. You have to earn that. You have to be able to justify it, give reasons. And Ninja's developed a whole set of dialogue systems, questions, processes to help you do that.
Yeah.
Just follow the 16-step seller process, follow the buyer process, and you'll just do fine and you'll have happy customers.
Well, thinking about the buyer process, right? I have personal experience with being able to showcase value in order to receive payment as a buyer's agent when I've done some FSBOs before, right? And I had one client in particular, we were just driving around and there was a new construction and there was a little sign out front that said for sale. And it was, the builder sign, you could tell. So he's like, ooh, I want that house. And I was okay. So we stopped, we walked in to the house. The builder was there. We chatted with him and whatnot. And I ended up talking to the builder and he said, yeah, this is the advertised price. And that does not include paying out a commission. This is the price that I want as a builder. And I said, okay, great. And that in discussing everything with my client, he's like, oh, we'll just add that on top then. We'll just add your fee on top because the value that you bring to this process for me. And we had upfront discussion about it, of course, but it all worked out, right? Our brokerage got paid. The builder was happy. The buyer was incredibly happy. And following the ninja process works. And I think this lawsuit is an interesting, I would say, wake up call for buyer's agents that have just been kind of just going with the flow, thinking that, hey, I exist, I'm going to help buyers and I'm just going to get paid because that's the way it is. And well, let's level that up a little bit.
If you really want to emphasize that though, Matt, like we've heard it said out there, I'm not saying anything new to anybody, but when the buyer's agent says like, oh, I'm free to you because and it's like,
it hurts my heart.
Whoa, hold on a second. Like you just put your free value on the table of what your service is that you're bringing here and who you are and what you represent. And I think that's where it's like, okay, like first off, as Larry, as you were saying, is like, we need to understand our value. And I think before you can ever share your value to the clients, you yourself need to understand what your value is. And I'm really hoping there's a lot of people over the next about 6 months to a year to whenever this thing plays out, that you take this time to really get clear on what your value is. Because if you don't understand your value, you can't showcase it to somebody else, or at least you can't help somebody understand it.
Yeah. Well, so with all that, Larry, I want to, you've been in the industry for a long time, I don't know how you've been in the industry for 50 years looking as young as you do, but it is what it is. And so you've seen sub-agency. I mean, you've come from, before there was buyer agency and kind of buyers had to fend for themselves in this country. And so share a little bit about what you saw when all of a sudden we were able to develop buyer representation and what that has done for the industry a little bit. And we can kind of play that back into how that correlates with this lawsuit.
Yeah, if you look at the history really of the MLS, interestingly, I started my real estate career in Manhattan, Kansas. And at that time, that market did not have an MLS. If you wanted to buy a house, it was basically like buying a car. You went from dealer to dealer. If you wanted to buy Chevy, you went to Chevy dealer, Toyota to Toyota dealer, et cetera. you couldn't just work with a realtor and look at everything. It was very difficult for everybody. It was difficult for buyers. It was difficult for realtors. Needless to say, I was ecstatic when I came to Fort Collins, Colorado, and discovered that they had an MLS. And I was the new kid in town. I didn't know anybody, was trying to get started in real estate. Here I have this, then it was an MLS book with over 500 houses for me to sell. And it was great, and I could work with a buyer and we could go all over. It was really quite phenomenal. At that time, and it's interesting when you look at, okay, whose money is it? A realtor would sit down with a seller and negotiate a commission and say, I will sell your house, and this is the fee for that. In an MLS, they decided, well, we could give that seller greater exposure in the market, have more buyers look at their house if we were to cooperate. And so we would offer a cooperating commission through the MLS. At that time, basically, the listing realtor was the agent. The buy-side realtor was the sub-agent. There was no buyer agency really at that time. You were a sub-agent of the listing agent. In fact, the term was that if you put something in the MLS, it was an offer of sub-agency, a unilateral offer of sub-agency. I think it was probably in the late 70s or maybe in the 80s that the idea of buyer representation came along. Because if you're working with a buyer, you don't even know that seller. You're technically a sub-agent of the listing agent, but your affiliation is more with the buyer. And buyer agency began to be, quote, a thing. And classes were held and so on. But what was kind of interesting was you're, quote, representing the buyer, but you're being paid by the seller. And I remember there was actually a couple of lawsuits, court cases, judges ruled that, hey, you can represent a buyer and be paid by the seller. That's you absolutely can do that. And so over time, we've evolved into this, really into the industry now, that you kind of have these two sides of the transaction. You got the seller side, the buyer side. Each side is representing, quote, their side. Well, what's changing right now with this lawsuit is potentially and probably the buy-side commission. You're going to have to earn that. You're going to have to articulate how you get paid. It's not going to be automatic through the MLS. That should not be that big of a problem for somebody who knows how to articulate their value and really take good care of the buyer.
I have an amazing agent that we actually interviewed on the podcast a couple of years back. Deborah Lecision is her name, and she's in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And we had her on the podcast, Larry, because we were going over her end of year numbers. And she said, I got an award, in my office. And the cool part about it was the person next to me, they got an award also. They got an award for the most amount of, it was the volume. They had hit the highest volume in the office when it came down to representing buyers. And so they got their award. And then they gave her an award specifically because she actually had a higher GCI when it came to the people that she was working with. And when they started to compare the two, they're like, wait, how in the world did you sell more volume, but you made more in GCI? And they started to look at it and she goes, well, I have an agreement that I work with my buyers and I formulate my value and I charge X amount. And it was way higher than what other buyers agents were earning in that marketplace. Mm-hmm. And everyone's like, how do you do it? And she's like, I'm worth it. Like I get paid for what I'm worth and my clients understand it and they're willing to pay. And I think that's the thing we need to understand going through this is that people are willing to pay for value. We do it every single day.
Right.
Matt, if we can share really quick, we're going to deviate just for a second here because Matt and I love to talk about cars and food and things like that. Matt, how much did we just pay for 2 ounces of A5 Wagyu beef?
I think it was $34 an ounce.
An ounce. We figured out what the minimum order was that we could get. We got 2 ounces. We split it amongst 4 of us. It was amazing. We would go back really and do it again. We all agreed on it. And you start to think about that. Who in the world would do that? Like, why would anybody spend that much on a steak? Well, it's been talked up. Anybody who knows Wagyu, it's been talked up a little bit out there. People understand that it's not like another steak that you can just get anywhere. And when you find a really good steakhouse that has it on the menu, we will pay for the value if we see the value there to us. We kind of had to discuss if it was worth it though, Matt. I think all of us at the table were like, is this ridiculous? Like,
We did have a long discussion. Well, you know what? It was the presentation of value too, because it wasn't just that this was on the menu. Because I'm sure we've all been to restaurants where there's something expensive on the menu and you look at it and you say, I'm not sure. But the lady who presented it, she had this great discussion about the filtered water, the massages that these cows get. And she said, if you try it, it's going to ruin every other steak that you eat for the rest of your life.
that was the line that we're like,
And that was the statement that was like, well, we have to try it now. Right. And that's the process that a lot of buyers agents haven't gone through. They haven't gone through that display of value, right?
In working with a buyer, in Ninja, we always say it's a 3-act play. Act 1 is the buyer consultation interview. Act 2 is showing property. Act 3 is the soft closing questions, writing the contract, getting to the closing table. What I've observed is most realtors do not participate in Act 1. They skip Act 1. They just start showing houses. And it's in Act 1 that you articulate your value and how this relationship is going to work. It's a 10-step process. In step 5, which we call the funnel process, when we're talking about, we want to make sure we look at everything so you don't miss anything. And we also want to help you so that you don't pay too much for it. And we talk about all the different properties that are out there, all the way from what's in the MLS, what's not in the MLS, a new construction, for sale by owners, bank-owned properties. And when it comes to for sale by owners, I say, I've never worked yet with a for sale by owner that wouldn't pay me. If you want my help, I can help you buy that for sale by owner. If you would prefer to work with them on your own by yourself, you're welcome to do that. Every single time the buyer said, wait, we don't want to be on our own by ourselves. We want a professional. We want to work with you. I say, great, And so this all happens in Act 1, in that interview. And yet so many realtors, they just can't wait to jump in the car and go show houses. There's no preparation for the buyer on market dynamics, the 5 negotiating points of a contract, preparing them for what's about to happen. Great Ninja Chris Doyle says, before you jump in the ocean, why don't we make sure you know how to swim? They learn how to swim in Act 1. It's how you help them be prepared for the marketplace. And ninjas do this. And if you do Act 1, if you do the buyer interview, that's where you articulate your value. Whether the seller pays you, whether the buyer pays you, you'll get paid if you do Act 1.
With you explaining that, I think it's important to mention too that for the folks who have not actually read all about the lawsuit, really like dug down into what was discussed, what was the case, this isn't about, or it wasn't about, at least this particular lawsuit, how much realtors get paid. It was really just about how the money flows and who's paying who. And then it went into some other things and some attacks on the industry and some policies and things like that is a whole deeper discussion, and there's appeals and all that stuff. So I don't really want to comment all that. But it wasn't originally even about how much people get paid, right? So if you do Act 1, you're covering yourself right there because you're providing value. I almost look, and Larry, I'm curious as you think, when you look at the evolution of the finance industry and stock brokerages, right? I kind of see like this slow moving process happening similarly in the real estate industry. The difference with stockbrokers was overnight, all of a sudden E-Trade came out, right? And electronic trading. And you now didn't have to pick up the phone and call somebody to place a trade. If you're going to do it yourself anyway, you could go do it, right? But the stockbrokers that provided great value, recommendations, wealth plans, they became wealth managers and are still doing very well, probably even better, right? So do you see some similarities, Larry, into the evolution of that industry into what's happening in the real estate industry now?
Absolutely. I think however this ends up will make us better and force us to be better. And if you don't get better, you probably won't be in the industry. I think that there'll be a flight to quality. There always is when there's change like this. The ninjas will do just fine. The people who are doing the 3-act play will do just fine. The ninjas who know how to articulate their value to their sellers and to their buyers will do actually probably better. The industry has a tendency to go through changes that kind of flush itself every 10 or 15 years. And I think we're maybe in one of those right now. there's various types of change, one of which is cyclical change. We're in a different market cycle now. Everybody's focused on that. But this lawsuit could bring about a structural change. And a structural change is when the rules change on how you do your business. We'll see what those rules finally end up being, and we'll abide by them, and we'll be successful because we still know that money and people flow to value. And if you're creating value, you're going to have, just like the stockbrokers who became wealth managers, they had to pivot a little bit and they had to be better. And the ones I know are doing much better than just executing trades.
That's what I would say is you watch these ones that look, I mean, there's a lot of people that when that happened in the stock world went, oh my gosh, I'm out. We're never going to be able to have what we used to have before. And then there's the ones that leaned into it and said, no, like, let's see how we can provide more value here. And that's what I see that's going to happen out of this time right now is we're already watching some agents that are like, I'm folding in my cards. Here's my license. I'm out. This has been a fun ride, guys. We're gone. It's not what I remember anymore. And then there's the ones right now that are leaning into it. And you look at the 10-step buyer's process that was created, Larry, and I know for myself and using it when I was selling real estate, I remember going through it and about halfway into it, where a lot of agents would have said, why am I wasting my client's time with this? We should be out looking at homes. My clients were sitting with me and they would all of a sudden stop and go, I've never had a realtor take this much time to know what's important to me and what I'm trying to do. And I just want to say thank you. And it's like, these people want it. Like they want someone to give them more time, more attention, really help them through this really difficult time and stressful time in their life. And that's where I keep going back to, and I'm happy where we started this out today, which is this, we need to understand that like, this is our playing field. This is what Ninja was been designed for a long time. And if you understand it, you're going to do absolutely amazing as we move forward. And whatever's given to us, we just need to understand people need our help.
You know, I hear that. Thanks, Garrett, for bringing that up. I hear that quite often from realtors. They say, well, my people are so busy. They're not going to spend an hour in Act 1 with the buyer interview. They just don't have time for that. I would disagree. And I love Chris Doyle's comment. He starts out by saying to and he works with a lot of power people, CEOs, coaches, and he says to them, look, if you'll invest an hour with me up front, it will save you days or even weeks on the back end. And more importantly, you're more likely to get the home you want. And power people understand return on investment. It was interesting. We taught a Ninja installation last week. We always like to have a coach in the room. Shelley Culberson was our coach in the room. And this topic came up and about Act 1 and the 10-step buyer process, the buyer interview, specifically steps 4 and 5, which is where you really get into where you articulate your value. Somebody raised their hand and says, well, what about a power buyer? Will they really take the time? Shelley had the pleasure of working with the president of Harry and David, which is a pretty big company. It's $1 billion company. She's working with the CEO, and she went through her 10-step buyer process. And he said to her, he says, we've bought a lot of homes over the years, and nobody's ever taken the time to go through this with us. This is so clarifying. I really appreciate this. And he was very, very complimentary of her. And he's a power guy. So take the time, learn the process. It creates value. And that's what it's all about. If you're creating value, you're going to have plenty of money and you'll have a great career.
I like your share from Chris Doyle too, because what Chris does is he sets the expectation for the power person. The power person freaks out when you start going down rabbit holes and they don't understand why you're doing it.
Right.
But if you go, this is why we're doing this, and this is the value and the benefit to you, they go, oh, got it. Okay, you do your process. But when you have an unclear process, they're like, what? We don't have time for this.
It is really amazing how that works. And so to kind of pull together this response to what people have been maybe panicking about, it's don't panic.
Yeah.
Don't panic. Don't be distracted. I'm glad you brought up don't be distracted in the beginning, Larry, because I've been getting text messages and emails of like, oh, did you see this article and this article? And you read them and you're like, gosh, these really are just total distractions. And it's like, the journalists are like, look at this great stuff we can go feast on in the real estate industry.
And now we have all the copycat lawsuits, so you could read all of those.
Oh yeah, you could read all of that. I mean, there's so much. And like you said, Larry, it's probably years before something would change legislatively, because local or state real estate commissions would probably have to be involved in changing certain things. There could be things that happen at an association level, but if we're showcasing value and showing up, I even look at the car world, right? We mostly still all go buy cars by going to dealership. But if you really want a particular type of car, there are people out there who will help you go find that car. They will get it pre-inspected for you. They will make sure that it has the right value. And this isn't for buying six-figure cars either. You can do this with nice luxury cars, pre-owned cars. There are people out there that provide those types of services as well. And so I don't think, and I think we're all sharing this thought that like buyer representation, I should say, whatever it's called and how it is structured, it's not going away. An agent is still going to be there to represent buyers on one of the most largest transactions of their lifetime. Is that fair?
So Matt, I used to sell cars, as a lot of people know, and it was always interesting when we were in the dealership and a broker would walk in. And it really was like, it was almost impossible to negotiate. It was really difficult. It took all the emotion out of the equation of the person you're working with, which is why we have real estate agents and we don't have buyers and sellers sit in the same room and battle it out. That broker would sit down and say, all right, I know what all your numbers are. I know what all the rebates are. I know actually that you have the car on the lot. I saw it in the back lot over there. And here's what we're willing to offer. And this is what this is going to look like. And as a salesperson, you were just like, okay, like let's figure this out. And it wasn't like, well, but what if we got you maybe a little different option in it? And he was like, well, I'll just take this to another dealership. It's been really nice talking to you. And he was like off. And it was like, wow, come back. The power of having a trusted person in that world for you, which isn't used very often, but they do exist out there. People would pay for those people. They actually made the money that you would spend on that broker to help you in that auto transaction, the car transaction, well worth its weight in gold. And so few didn't take advantage of it and didn't use it. But from the consumer's perspective, that was actually the best way you could go. But you could easily look at it up front and say, oh my gosh, it's expensive. I have to pay them X amount on top of the sale of the car. It's like, yeah, they earn it every single time. And I think I'm not saying it's going to be exactly that way, but this is understanding your value and being able to articulate it.
Once again, they created more in value than they received in payment.
Yep.
It always goes back to that.
So, Larry, this was awesome. As always, I always love having you on the podcast. I appreciate you just as a human being on so many levels. And this is amazing. Is there any last points we want to put in? I have a feeling we're going to have a handful of more kind of deeper dives into certain areas around this, but we really wanted to address all the ninjas out there, all the listeners of the podcast, of really the overall how you should be looking at what's kind of going on right now. Is there anything we missed, guys, that we want to throw in before we part?
I think we pretty well covered it. I think to summarize, just be a ninja, follow your seller process, follow your buyer process, create value for your people, help them go from the life they have to the life they dream about, and you're going to be just fine.
Love it.
All right. Well, with that being said, thank you to both of you for your time this morning. It is early this morning. That's when we're recording this. For all of you that want to learn more about what Ninja is, if you're listening to this and going like, okay, this is all great stuff, but where do I go learn more about it? Go to ninjaselling.com. You can learn all about the system on there and what the actual next steps for you would be. You can go grab the book, which Larry Kendall, sitting right in front of us right now, is the author of. And that'll give you the foundation of what everything is about Ninja. If you want to take an installation, we have those classes available. You can find those at ninjaselling.com. And if you want to go deeper and take this into your business, we have the help of coaches that we oversee and amazing coaches out there that can help you with your business one-on-one and other platforms for you. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining us today. And hopefully this answered some questions for you. And again, thanks to the two of you.
Thank you, Larry, again for joining us. And thanks, everybody. We'll catch you on the next one.
If you enjoyed today's episode and would like more, visit us at theninjasellingpodcast.com.
There you will also find links for more information about ninja selling and coaching. Have an incredible day.